The year was 2387, and across the galaxy, alien species whispered a name that made their blood run cold. Jake Morrison. They called him the Human Storm, the devil of deep space, the man who could not be killed. Some said he was more machine than human. Others believed he was death itself wearing a human face. Jake Morrison had ended wars with nothing but his mind and a single ship. He had walked into enemy strongholds and emerged with their leaders begging for mercy. The Zephyrian Empire, once the terror of 3 star systems, had surrendered to humanity after Jake infiltrated their command fortress and held their emperor at gunpoint for 6 hours. The nightmare of Proxima Station had become legend when Jake held off an entire alien fleet for 3 days with a damaged ship and pure determination. Every alien civilization in the galaxy knew his name. Parents told their children scary stories about the human who could appear anywhere, strike without warning, and disappear like smoke. Military commanders studied his battles, trying to understand how one human could be so deadly. Politicians tried to negotiate with humanity because they feared what Jake Morrison might do if talks failed. But Jake Morrison had a secret that could destroy him. A secret that only 5 people in the entire galaxy knew about. He had a daughter. Katie Morrison was 18 years old and lived on a quiet colony world called Haven's Rest. She attended the local university where she studied alien life forms and dreamed of peaceful contact between species. Katie had brown hair like her father and the same sharp green eyes, but she had never hurt anyone in her life. She spent her days reading about alien cultures and her nights looking up at the stars, wondering what wonders waited out there. Katie did not know her father was the most feared human alive. She thought he was a simple cargo ship captain named Jake Wells who traveled between planets delivering supplies. He visited her once every few months, always tired, always quiet, always carrying the weight of secrets she could not imagine. When people asked about her family, Katie told them her father hauled freight and her mother had died in an accident when she was young. The truth was more complicated. Jake had hidden Katie on Haven's Rest after losing his wife in a terrorist attack 7 years ago. He had created false records, bribed officials, and built an entire fake identity around his daughter. To the galaxy, Katie Morrison did not exist. Only Katie Wells, the quiet student who wanted to study alien biology and maybe become a teacher someday. Jake visited his daughter whenever he could, but he never stayed long. It was too dangerous. Every moment he spent with Katie increased the chance that his enemies would discover her existence. So he would sit in her small apartment, listen to her talk about her classes, help her with homework, and pretend to be a normal father. Then he would leave and go back to being the galaxy's most dangerous weapon. But Jake Morrison had enemies who never stopped looking for ways to hurt him. The Vorthan Empire had been searching for his weakness for 5 years. They were tall gray aliens with forearms and minds that worked like computers. Their leader, Commander Zexhai, had lost 3 fleets to Jake Morrison and wanted revenge more than he wanted to breathe. Commander Zexhai had put his best agents on the task of finding something Jake Morrison cared about. They followed his movements, tracked his communications, and slowly built a picture of the human who seemed to have no weaknesses. For 4 years, they found nothing. Jake Morrison appeared to care about no one and nothing except winning battles. Then 6 months ago, a Vorthan spy intercepted a coded message. It was brief and seemed meaningless, but Zexhai's computers found patterns in the numbers. The message had been sent to Haven's Rest to someone named Katie Wells. More messages followed, always coded, always careful, but gradually, the Vorthans began to understand what they had found. Jake Morrison, the man who had no weaknesses, had a daughter. Zexhai spent weeks confirming the intelligence. He sent agents to Haven's Rest who posed as students and teachers. They watched Katie, photographed her, and slowly confirmed what the intercepted messages suggested. The girl had Jake Morrison's eyes and his quick mind. She moved like him when she was thinking hard about something. Most importantly, the dates of her mystery father's visits matched exactly with gaps in Jake Morrison's military assignments. The Vorthan commander felt something like joy for the first time in years. He had found the weapon that would destroy humanity's greatest champion. Not a bomb or a gun, but a teenage girl who did not even know who her father really was. HFY planned carefully. The attack had to look random, like terrorism or pirates. If it seemed like a targeted kidnapping, Jake Morrison would know immediately who was responsible and come hunting. Instead, it had to appear to be bad luck, wrong place at wrong time. That would give the Vorthons time to get Katie far away before her father realized what had really happened. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. A group of Vorthon agents would attack the university during the day when lots of students were around. They would cause chaos, take several hostages, including Katie, and make it look like they were after research data or ransom money. In the confusion, they would grab Katie and disappear, leaving the other hostages behind. By the time anyone realized Katie Wells was missing, she would be halfway across the galaxy. On a Tuesday morning in late spring, Katie Morrison walked to her xenobiology class like she had done hundreds of times before. She carried her books in an old backpack and stopped to buy coffee from a vendor who always smiled and asked about her studies. The sun was shining, birds were singing in the trees that lined the campus walkways, and Katie was thinking about a paper she had to write on Aldorian mating rituals. She never saw the Vorthon agents watching her from across the quad. She did not notice the unusual number of maintenance workers around the science building. Katie walked into her classroom, sat in her usual spot by the window, and opened her notebook just as the first explosions echoed across the campus. The attack was swift and professional. Fourth-hand soldiers in stolen maintenance uniforms sealed the building exits while others rounded up students and teachers. They moved with military precision, stunning anyone who resisted and herding the rest into the main lecture hall. Katie found herself pushed along with 24 other terrified students, her mind struggling to understand what was happening. The lead Vorthon agent announced they were there for research data and would release everyone once they got what they came for. He spoke through a voice modifier that made him sound human, but Katie noticed things that others missed. The way he stood, the shape of his hands inside his gloves, the pattern of his breathing. Her xenobiology studies told her she was looking at something that was definitely not human. For 2 hours, the agents made a show of searching computers and demanding access to research files. Katie huddled with her classmates, trying to stay calm and unnoticed. She had no idea that 3 of the agents had her photograph and were waiting for the right moment to complete their real mission. When the moment came, it happened fast. A small explosion in the hallway created confusion and smoke. In the chaos, strong hands grabbed Katie and dragged her toward a service exit that had been secretly prepared. She tried to scream, but something covered her mouth and nose. The last thing she remembered was the smell of alien chemicals and the feeling of being carried away from everything she had ever known. By evening, local security forces had secured the building and begun investigating what appeared to be a failed robbery attempt. 23 students and 5 teachers had been held hostage but not seriously harmed. The attackers had escaped with some research data but no people. It took 6 hours for anyone to realize that Katie Wells was missing. By then, she was already aboard a Vorthon ship, unconscious and traveling toward a destiny that would shake the entire galaxy. Jake Morrison was reviewing tactical reports aboard the military station Omega-7 when the message came through. He had been planning an operation against pirate strongholds in the Outer Rim, studying maps and supply routes with the same cold focus that had made him legendary. The communication officer approached carefully, knowing better than to interrupt the human storm unless it was urgent. The message was from Haven's Rest. University attack. Students taken hostage. All safe now. But Jake knew something was wrong before he finished reading. The message was too short, too careful. He had taught the colony administrators how to communicate with him, and this was not their usual style. Jake's hands moved across his personal communicator with practiced speed. He sent a coded message to Haven's Rest using a frequency that only 3 people knew about. The response should have come back immediately. Instead, silence filled the channel like a physical weight. He tried again, this time using an emergency code that Katie had memorized when she was 12 years old. Still nothing. Jake Morrison, the man who had stared down alien emperors without blinking, felt something cold and terrible growing in his chest. Within minutes, Jake had accessed the security feeds from Haven's Rest University. He watched the attack unfold on multiple screens, his trained eyes catching details that local investigators had missed. The attackers moved like soldiers, not criminals. Their weapons were military grade, not the cheap guns that terrorists usually carried. Most importantly, they had taken nothing of real value despite having access to genuinely important research. Jake's fingers flew across the keyboard as he cross-referenced the attack timeline with Katie's class schedule. His daughter should have been in xenobiology class when the attack happened. The security camera in that classroom had mysteriously stopped working 30 minutes before the first explosion. The realization hit Jake like a physical blow. This had been a targeted operation. Someone had taken his daughter. For 30 seconds, Jake Morrison sat perfectly still. Officers who worked with him later said they had never seen him look so calm, so quiet. It was the kind of stillness that came before terrible storms. Then Jake stood up, and when he spoke, his voice carried the promise of violence that had made entire civilizations surrender. "Get me my team," he said. "All of them. Right now." Within 2 hours, 4 people had dropped everything they were doing and traveled across the galaxy to reach Jake Morrison. They came because he had never asked for help before, and they knew that if Jake Morrison was calling in favors, the situation was beyond desperate. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Parker arrived first. She was a small woman with gray hair and eyes that seemed to see through people. Amy had served with Jake for 15 years and understood alien psychology better than most aliens understood themselves. She had been the one to figure out how to negotiate with the crystal beings of Vega Prime, and had prevented 3 wars through careful diplomacy. Major Steve Rodriguez came next, a big man with scarred hands and an easy smile that hid a genius for making things explode. Steve could build a bomb from kitchen supplies or disarm alien weapons he had never seen before. He had saved Jake's life so many times that they had stopped keeping count. Dr. Lisa Grant was the third to arrive. She was younger than the others, a brilliant scientist who had made herself an expert on every form of alien technology in the known galaxy. Lisa could hack Vorthon computers, repair Zephyrian engines, and understand alien languages that had no human equivalent. She wore thick glasses and always carried a tablet full of technical manuals. Commander Ryan Clark was the last to arrive, but he came in his own ship because he was the best pilot humanity had ever produced. Ryan could fly anything with engines, and had once navigated an asteroid field while blind and injured. He had been Jake's wingman in more battles than either of them could remember. Jake gathered his team in a secure conference room and told them about Katie. Amy Parker went very quiet when she learned that Jake had a daughter he had never mentioned. Steve Rodriguez cracked his knuckles and asked who they were going to kill. Lisa Grant immediately began analyzing the security footage on her tablet. Ryan Clark just nodded and said he would fuel up his ship. They worked through the night, following trails of evidence that would have been invisible to normal investigators. Lisa discovered that the university's security system had been hacked using Vorthon code signatures. Amy identified behavioral patterns in the attackers that matched Vorthon military training. Steve found traces of exotic explosives that were only manufactured in 3 star systems, all of them controlled by Vorthon allies. By morning, they knew who had taken Katie Morrison. Commander Zexhai of the Vorthon Empire had finally found Jake's weakness and decided to exploit it. The Vorthons confirmed this 12 hours later when they sent Jake a message. It was simple and direct. They had his daughter. She was alive and unharmed. If Jake wanted her back, he would surrender himself to Vorthon justice. The meeting would take place at Neutral Station Alpha in 72 hours. Come alone or the girl would die. Jake's team read the message in silence. They all knew it was an obvious trap. Zexhai wanted Jake Morrison dead or captured, and he was using Katie as bait. If Jake went to the meeting, he would be walking into a carefully prepared ambush with no hope of survival. "We'll figure out another way," Amy said. "We'll track down their ship, mount a rescue operation." "Not enough time," Jake replied. His voice was calm, but his team could see the fury burning behind his eyes. "They'll move her the moment they realize I'm not coming to the meeting." Steve Rodriguez leaned forward. So what's the plan, boss? Because I know you're not actually thinking about surrendering to those gray-skinned murderers. Jake Morrison smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. His team had seen that smile before, usually right before entire enemy fleets started exploding. I'm going to the meeting, Jake said. But not to surrender. Meanwhile, Katie Morrison was waking up in a cell aboard a Vorthan ship. Her head hurt, her mouth was dry, and she had no idea where she was. The walls around her were made of some kind of gray metal that seemed to pulse with its own light. The air tasted wrong, too clean and too cold. A door she had not noticed opened, and something walked in that made Katie's xenobiology training kick into overdrive. The creature was tall and thin, with gray skin and 4 arms. Its head was larger than a human head, and its eyes were completely black. Katie recognized it immediately from her textbooks. A Vorthon. Hello, Katie Wells, the alien said in perfect English. Or should I say Katie Morrison? Katie's heart stopped. Nobody knew her real name except her father and a few of his closest friends. She had lived as Katie Wells for 7 years, and her false identity had been perfect. But somehow, this alien creature knew the truth. I am Commander Zexhai, the Vorthon continued, and you are the daughter of the most dangerous human in the galaxy. I have been looking forward to meeting you for a very long time. Katie tried to speak, but her voice came out as a whisper. I don't understand. My father is a cargo ship captain. He delivers supplies between planets. Zexhai made a sound that might have been laughter. Your father is Jake Morrison, the human storm. He has killed more of my people than any other creature in the galaxy, and now finally, I have found a way to make him pay for what he has done. The alien commander moved closer to Katie's cell, and she could see her own reflection in his black eyes. Your father will come for you, Katie Morrison. And when he does, I will be waiting. Jake Morrison did not go to the meeting at Neutral Station Alpha. Instead, he went hunting. The Vorthans expected him to either surrender or try to rescue Katie through direct assault. They did not expect Jake to begin systematically destroying everything they had built across 3 star systems. But that was exactly what he did. Jake's first target was a Vorthan supply depot on the edge of civilized space. The depot provided fuel and weapons to Vorthan fleets, and its destruction would cripple their operations for months. Jake and his team approached the facility in Ryan Clark's modified ship, using stealth technology that Lisa Grant had stolen from the Zephyrians years earlier. The attack lasted exactly 11 minutes. Steve Rodriguez disabled the depot's shields with precisely placed explosives while Amy Parker jammed their communications. Jake and Ryan eliminated the guards with cold efficiency. Then Lisa downloaded everything from the facility's computers, before Steve blew the entire complex into space dust. But Jake was not finished. The computer files that Lisa had stolen contained shipping schedules, supply routes, and communication codes. Within hours, Jake's team hit 2 Vorthan cargo ships and a communications relay station. Each attack was swift, brutal, and perfectly executed. The Vorthans began to understand that they had made a terrible mistake. Jake Morrison was not coming to rescue his daughter through negotiation or desperate assault. He was doing what he did best. He was making war. Commander Zexhai received reports of the attacks while standing in Katie's cell, trying to understand how one human could cause so much damage so quickly. Katie watched the alien commander grow more agitated with each message, and she began to realize that her father was far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Your father is destroying years of careful planning, Zexhai told Katie. His 4 arms moved in patterns that she recognized as signs of extreme stress. He should be trying to save you, not starting a war. Katie looked at the alien commander with new understanding. You don't know him at all, do you? You thought taking me would make him weak, but it made him angry. And when my father gets angry, people die. Meanwhile, Jake's campaign of destruction was attracting attention across the galaxy. Other alien civilizations watched in fascination and terror as the human storm unleashed his full fury against the Vorthons. Some species that had their own grudges against the Vorthan Empire began providing Jake with intelligence and resources. The Kethron Federation, longtime enemies of both humans and Vorthans, sent Jake detailed maps of Vorthan military installations. The peaceful Aldorian Republic secretly provided fuel and supplies, claiming they were helping to prevent a larger war. Even some Vorthan colonies began surrendering without a fight when they learned Jake Morrison was in their star system. Dr. Lisa Grant made the breakthrough that changed everything. While analyzing data from the destroyed supply depot, she found shipping records that showed unusual activity in the Maelstrom Nebula. The nebula was a dangerous region of space filled with radiation storms and gravitational anomalies that made normal navigation almost impossible. But the records showed that Vorthon ships had been making regular trips there for months. That's where they're hiding, Lisa told Jake. The main fleet, maybe their command ship. It's the perfect place to keep prisoners because nobody else can. Get there. Amy Parker studied the tactical data and shook her head. It's a death trap, Jake. The nebula will destroy any ship that tries to navigate it. Even if we could get through, we'd be flying blind into whatever defenses they have waiting. Jake Morrison looked at the star charts for a long moment. The Maelstrom Nebula was indeed nearly impossible to navigate, but Jake had done impossible things before. More importantly, every hour that passed was another hour that Katie remained in Vorthan hands. Ryan, Jake said to his pilot, can you get us through that nebula? Commander Clark studied the navigation data with the focused intensity of a man who had spent his life pushing ships beyond their limits. Maybe, he said finally. I'd need to modify the Retribution's shields and navigation systems. Lisa would have to build us some kind of radiation protection, and we'd still be flying mostly blind once we got inside. How long? Jake asked. 2 days to make the modifications, maybe 3. Jake nodded. Do it. Steve, I want enough firepower, loaded on that ship to level a planet. Amy, start working on Vorthan fleet tactics. I want to know how they think, how they fight, and how they die. While Jake's team prepared for their assault on the nebula, Katie was learning more about her situation from an unexpected source. One of her Vorthon guards, a younger alien named Kextai, had begun talking to her during his shifts. Unlike Commander Zexhai, Kextai seemed almost reluctant to be part of the kidnapping. Your father has killed many of my people, Kextai told Katie during one of their conversations. But he has also shown mercy when others would have shown none. There are stories that even we tell about the human storm's honor in battle. Katie used her xenobiology knowledge to understand Vorthan body language and psychology. She could see that Kextai was conflicted about the mission, and she began to carefully build trust with him. Through their conversations, she learned crucial information about the ship's layout, the crew's routines, and most importantly, the location of the shuttle bay. She also learned that the Vorthons were planning something much worse than a simple prisoner exchange. Commander Zexhai intended to broadcast Katie's execution across the galaxy as a warning to humanity. He wanted to break Jake Morrison's spirit and show other humans what happened to those who opposed the Vorthan Empire. The knowledge that she was going to die changed something inside Katie Morrison. The fear that had paralyzed her since her kidnapping began to transform into something else. Anger, determination, the same cold fury that had made her father legendary. Katie began planning her own escape. She studied the guard rotations, memorized the ship's layout from Kextai's descriptions, and used her knowledge of alien biology to understand her captor's weaknesses. She was still Jake Morrison's daughter, and she had inherited more than just his eyes and intelligence. Back in human space, Jake's modifications to the Retribution were nearly complete. Lisa Grant had built radiation shields that would protect them from the nebula's worst effects, though she warned that the protection would only last a few hours. Steve Rodriguez had loaded enough explosives and ammunition to supply a small army. Amy Parker had identified the likely composition and tactics of the Vorthan fleet they would face. Ryan Clark ran final tests on the navigation system he had cobbled together from 3 different alien technologies. The system would allow them to fly through the nebula, but it was untested and unreliable. One miscalculation would send them into a gravity well or radiation storm that would tear their ship apart. It's not perfect, Ryan admitted to Jake. Actually, it's probably going to get us killed. But it's the only way to reach your daughter. Jake Morrison looked at his team, these people who had followed him through impossible battles and hopeless situations. They were risking everything to help him save Katie, and he knew that most of them would probably not survive the mission. Last, chance to walk away, Jake told them. This isn't your fight. Amy Parker smiled. Like hell it isn't. Katie's family, which makes her our family too. Steve Rodriguez cracked his knuckles. Besides, I've always wanted to blow up a Vorthan command ship. This might be my only chance. Lisa Grant adjusted her glasses. The technical challenge alone is worth the risk. Plus, someone needs to keep you idiots alive. Ryan Clark just nodded. Toward the pilot's seat. Where are we going, boss? Jake Morrison felt something that might have been gratitude, though he had almost forgotten what that emotion felt like. These people were more than his team. They were his family, and they were willing to die for his daughter. We're going to get Katie back, Jake said, and we're going to make the Vorthans regret they ever learned her name. The Retribution launched from the space station and began its journey toward the Maelstrom Nebula. Behind them, Jake left burning Vorthan installations and a reputation that had grown even more fearsome. Ahead of them waited the most dangerous mission of their lives. Katie Morrison, locked in her cell aboard the Vorthan flagship, felt her father coming. She did not know how she knew, but she could sense his approach like a storm on the horizon. Soon the galaxy would learn what happened when someone threatened Jake Morrison's family. The Maelstrom Nebula was a nightmare of twisted space and deadly radiation. Lightning storms the size of planets crackled between clouds of poisonous gas, while gravity wells strong enough to crush battleships appeared and disappeared without warning. It was the kind of place where ships went to die, which made it perfect for hiding a secret fleet. Ryan Clark gripped the controls of the Retribution as the ship bucked and shook through the nebula's outer edge. Warning lights flashed across every console, and the radiation alarm screamed constantly. Lisa Grant worked frantically at her station, trying to keep their improvised shields from failing under the enormous stress. Radiation levels are spiking, Lisa called out over the noise. The shields are holding, but barely. We have maybe 2 hours before they fail completely. Jake Morrison stood behind Ryan's pilot seat, watching the swirling chaos outside their viewports. Somewhere in this deadly maze, the Vorthans were hiding with his daughter. He had come too far and destroyed too much to fail now. Contact, Amy Parker announced from the sensor station. Multiple ships bearing 27 Mark IV. It's a big fleet, Jake, at least 20 vessels. Can you identify the command ship? Jake asked. Amy studied her readings. The largest vessel is at the center of their formation. Heavy armor, massive power signature. That has to be where they're keeping Katie. Steve Rodriguez finished arming the last of his explosives and joined the others on the bridge. So what's the plan? Please tell me we're not just flying straight at them and hoping for the best. Jake smiled, but there was no humor in it. Actually, that's exactly what we're doing, but with a few modifications. The plan Jake outlined was insane even by his standards. They would approach the Vorthan fleet at maximum speed, using the nebula's radiation storms to mask their approach. Steve would launch torpedo salvos at the smaller ships to create chaos and confusion. Meanwhile, Lisa would jam their communications and Ryan would ram the Retribution directly into the command ship's docking bay. Ram the ship? Ryan repeated. Jake, that's suicide. Even if we survive the impact, we'll be trapped inside an enemy vessel with no way out. We'll worry about getting out after we get Katie, Jake replied. Just get us inside that ship, Ryan. Leave the rest to me. As the Retribution approached the Vorthan fleet, the enemy ships began to react. Patrol vessels moved to intercept while the larger ships powered up their weapons. But Jake's team had one advantage that the Vorthans had. Not expected. They were not trying to survive this mission. They were trying to complete it. Steve Rodriguez launched his first torpedo salvo at a Vorthan cruiser. The explosions lit up the nebula like fireworks, and pieces of alien metal spun away into the toxic clouds. 2 more Vorthan ships moved to engage, but Lisa's jamming systems made their targeting computers useless. They fired blindly into the storm, hitting nothing but empty space. Ryan pushed the Retribution through a gravity well that should have torn the ship apart, using the massive forces to slingshot toward the command vessel. Vorthan fighters swarmed around them, firing energy weapons that left burning scars across their hull. But Ryan flew like a man possessed, dodging obstacles that no sane pilot would even attempt. Aboard the Vorthan flagship, Commander HFY watched the approaching human ship with a mixture of admiration and terror. Jake Morrison was actually flying through the Maelstrom Nebula to rescue his daughter. The human was either completely insane or far more dangerous than even HFY had believed. All ships, concentrate fire on the human vessel, HFY ordered. Destroy them before they reach us. But it was too late. The retribution smashed through the flagship's shields and armor like a bullet through paper. Ryan had aimed for the docking bay, and his piloting was perfect. The human ship tore a massive hole in the Vorthan vessel's side and lodged itself deep in the ship's hull. Katie Morrison felt the impact from her cell 3 levels below. The entire ship shook like it was coming apart, and emergency alarms began, wailing throughout the vessel. Her guard, Kextai, looked terrified as he struggled to maintain his balance. "What was that?" Katie asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Kextai checked his communication device with all 4 hands shaking. "A human ship has breached the hull. They are aboard our vessel." Katie felt something that might have been hope. Her father had come for her, just like she had known he would. But she also knew that Jake Morrison and his team were now trapped inside a ship full of enemies, fighting impossible odds to reach her. Jake and his team emerged from the wrecked retribution into chaos. The Vorthan docking bay was filled with smoke and debris, and alien crew members ran in all directions trying to organize a defense. Jake moved through them like death itself, his weapon firing with mechanical precision. Every shot found its target, and every target fell. Amy Parker consulted the ship schematics that Lisa had downloaded from the captured computers. "Prisoner cells should be 3 levels down, Section 7, but we'll have to fight through half the ship to get there." "Then, we fight," Jake said simply. What followed was a running battle through the corridors of an alien warship. The Vorthans had the advantage of numbers and knowledge of their own ship's layout, but Jake's team had experience, superior training, and the desperate fury of people fighting to save family. Steve Rodriguez turned every intersection into a death trap with his explosives. Lisa hacked into the ship's systems and began turning the Vorthans' own defenses against them. Amy used her knowledge of alien psychology to predict where the enemy would make their stands. And Jake Morrison carved a path of destruction through anyone stupid enough to get in his way. Meanwhile, Katie was putting her own escape plan into action. When Kextai left her cell to join the ship's defense, Katie used techniques her father had taught her years ago to pick the lock on her door. Her xenobiology knowledge helped her understand the alien mechanism, and within minutes she was free. The corridors outside her cell were filled with smoke and the sound of battle. Katie could hear explosions and weapon fire echoing through the ship's ventilation system. Somewhere above her, her father was fighting his way toward her position, but Katie Morrison was done being a helpless victim. She made her way through the ship's service corridors, avoiding the main passages where Vorthan soldiers were rushing to repel the human invasion. Her goal was the shuttle bay, where she hoped to steal a ship and escape before the battle destroyed the entire vessel. But Katie's route took her through the ship's command center, where she encountered Commander HFY himself. The Vorthan commander was coordinating his force's response to Jake's assault, but he recognized Katie immediately. "The human daughter," HFY said, drawing his weapon. "Perfect. Your father will surrender when he sees your dead body." Katie looked at the alien who had ordered her kidnapping and felt the same cold anger that had made her father famous. "You made one mistake," she told HFY. "You assumed I was helpless." The confrontation that followed would have made Jake Morrison proud. Katie used her knowledge of Vorthan physiology to exploit the commander's weaknesses, while her father's training helped her survive his attempts to kill her. When it was over, Commander HFY lay unconscious on the floor of his own command center, and Katie Morrison had proven that she was truly her father's daughter. Jake and his team reached Katie's cell to find it empty. For a moment, Jake felt panic unlike anything he had experienced in years of warfare. Then Amy's scanner picked up human life signs moving through the ship's upper levels. "She's alive," Amy reported, "and she's moving toward the shuttle bay." Jake smiled for the first time since Katie's kidnapping. His daughter had not waited to be rescued. She was rescuing herself, but their reunion would have to wait. Zexai's second-in-command had triggered the ship's self-destruct sequence rather than allow the humans to escape with their prize. The Vorthon flagship was tearing itself apart around them, and they had minutes to reach the shuttle bay before the entire vessel exploded. The race against time had begun, and the Morrison family's survival hung in the balance. The Vorthon flagship was dying around them. Explosions rocked the massive ship as its own weapons turned inward, tearing through bulkheads and corridors. Emergency lights flashed red in the smoke-filled air, and the constant sound of alarms mixed with the groaning of metal under impossible stress. Jake Morrison ran through the collapsing corridors with his team close behind. They had 8 minutes before the ship's reactor overloaded and took half the nebula with it. 8 minutes to find Katie and escape a vessel that was becoming a tomb. Life signs are moving fast toward Section 12. Amy Parker called out over the noise. She's almost at the shuttle bay. Jake felt pride and terror in equal measure. His daughter was alive and moving on her own, which meant she had escaped her cell somehow. But she was also somewhere in this dying ship, racing against time just like they were. Meanwhile, Katie Morrison was proving that intelligence ran in the family. She had found a maintenance shaft that led directly to the shuttle bay, avoiding the main corridors where panicked Vorthon crew members were running in all directions. Her xenobiology training helped her understand the alien ship's layout, while skills her father had taught her years ago kept her moving quietly through the cramped space. Katie reached the shuttle bay just as Jake's team arrived from the opposite direction. Father and daughter saw each other across the chaos of the landing area, and for a moment time seemed to stop. Katie looked older than her 18 years, with dirt on her face and determination in her eyes that Jake recognized as his own. Jake looked exactly like what he was, a father who had traveled across the galaxy and fought through impossible odds to save his child. "Dad?" Katie called out, hardly believing what she was seeing. "Katie," Jake replied, his voice breaking slightly on her name. They ran toward each other across the shuttle bay floor, but their reunion was interrupted by the arrival of the remaining Vorthon guards. A dozen alien soldiers poured into the bay, their weapons aimed at the humans who had destroyed their ship and killed their commander. Jake stepped in front of his daughter without thinking, his weapon already firing. But Katie surprised everyone, including her father, by moving to his side instead of hiding behind him. She had learned things about herself during her captivity, and one of those things was that she was done being helpless. "The shuttle on the left," Katie shouted over the sound of weapon fire. "I studied its systems while I was waiting for you. It's fueled and ready to launch." Jake's team laid down covering fire while Katie led them toward the alien shuttle. Steve Rodriguez threw his last explosives at the bay doors, sealing them against reinforcements. Lisa Grant worked to override the shuttle's security systems. Amy Parker and Ryan Clark held the Vorthons back with precise shooting that would have impressed any military instructor. But they were running out of time. The ship's reactor was reaching critical levels, and the shuttle bay was starting to depressurize as the flagship's hull cracked under the stress of its own destruction. "Got it," Lisa announced as the shuttle's engines came online. "Everyone aboard now." They piled into the alien vessel just as the bay doors exploded outward. Ryan Clark took the pilot's seat and launched them into the swirling chaos of the Maelstrom Nebula, while behind them the Vorthon flagship became a brief new star before collapsing into twisted metal and vapor. The shuttle was not designed for the nebula's harsh conditions, and Ryan had to use every trick he had learned in 30 years of flying to keep them alive. The little ship bucked and rolled through gravity wells and radiation storms, its hull heating up dangerously as they fought their way toward clear space. "Will this thing hold together?" Jake asked, watching sparks fly from overloaded control panels. "Ask me when we get out of here," Ryan replied through gritted teeth. Katie sat beside her father in the shuttle's cramped passenger area, and for the first time since her kidnapping, she felt truly safe. But she also had questions that needed answers. "So you're really the human storm," she said. It was not a question. Jake looked at his daughter and saw that the frightened girl who had been taken from her university was gone. In her place sat a young woman who had survived kidnapping, escaped from an alien prison and helped fight her way off a dying warship, Katie had grown up in the worst possible way, but she had grown up. Yes, Jake said simply. I'm sorry you had to find out like this. Katie was quiet for a moment, processing everything that had happened. All those times you visited me, all those stories about being a cargo ship captain, were any of them true? The important parts were true, Jake replied. I love you. I wanted to protect you. I wanted you to have a normal life. Normal, Katie repeated with a bitter laugh. Dad, I just knocked out a Vorthan commander with my bare hands and helped steal an alien shuttle. I don't think normal was ever really an option. Ryan Clark managed to pilot them out of the nebula and into normal space, where they were met by a sight that took everyone's breath away. The entire Vorthon fleet that had been hiding in the maelstrom was gone. In its place was a field of debris and the dim glow of dying engines. Jake's assault on the flagship had triggered a chain reaction that destroyed every ship in the hidden armada. Well, Steve Rodriguez said, looking at the destruction through the shuttle's viewport, I guess we won. But Jake Morrison was not thinking about victory. He was thinking about consequences. The destruction of the Vorthan fleet would be seen as an act of war by some alien civilizations, and as proof of human superiority by others. The delicate balance of power in the galaxy had shifted, and Jake's actions would have effects that reached far beyond his personal fight to save his daughter. Over the following weeks, as they made their way back to human space, Katie and Jake began the difficult process of rebuilding their relationship. Katie was angry about the lies her father had told her, but she also understood why he had done it. Jake was proud of how strong and capable his daughter had become, but he was also terrified by the danger his reputation would always bring to her life. I can't go back to being Katie Wells, she told him during one of their long conversations. Too many people know who I really am now. The Vorthans who survived will want revenge. Other aliens will see me as a target or a prize. Jake nodded sadly. He had always known this day might come, but he had hoped it would be later, when Katie was older and better prepared for the reality of being Jake Morrison's daughter. So what do you want to do? He asked. Katie looked out at the stars streaming past their shuttle and made a decision that would change her life forever. I want to learn. I want you to teach me everything you know about fighting, about tactics, about survival. If I'm going to be Jake Morrison's daughter for the rest of my life, then I'm going to be the best Jake Morrison's daughter I can be. Jake smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. Are you sure? It won't be easy. The training is hard, and the life is dangerous. Dad, Katie said, I was kidnapped by aliens, held prisoner on a warship, and helped blow up an entire fleet. I think I can handle whatever training you have in mind. When they finally reached human space, news of Jake Morrison's rescue mission had already spread across the galaxy. Some alien civilizations were more afraid of humanity than ever before, knowing that humans would go to any length to protect their families. Others gained a new respect for human determination and loyalty. Jake Morrison's reputation evolved from the galaxy's most dangerous human to something even more frightening. A father who would burn down star systems to keep his family safe. And standing beside him was Katie Morrison, no longer the hidden daughter, but a young woman ready to forge her own legend in a galaxy that now knew exactly who she was. The Morrison family had survived their greatest test, but they both knew it would not be their last. The galaxy was a dangerous place, and their enemies would not forget what had happened in the Maelstrom Nebula. But they would face whatever came next together, as a family that had proven there was nothing they could not overcome. And across the galaxy, in alien capitals and military headquarters, a new understanding spread. Jake Morrison was dangerous when he fought for duty or honor, but when he fought for family, he was unstoppable.